Segment 2, Gold and Black Live. Matt Stevens joins us. I want to thank our sponsors again, Triple X, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, Hilton Garden Inn, and Basham Reynolds for all their support over the years. I think they've been with us ever since we've been doing this show, which I always forget how many years it's been, 6 or 7, somewhere around there.
Back before color.
Yeah, we used to do it in black and white. No, that's not true. That is not true. We don't want to get any fake news started here. Mike Berghoff, very interesting. You know, Matt, and obviously your role in covering football and being somewhat new to hear the idea that they're trying to continue to move things forward, talking about, I mean, there's been talk about the south end zone for years, right, but that the importance of you can't sit still in this world of college football.
Well, there's SEC programs that would love to have the football performance facility that Purdue has. I mean, that's something that, you know, I'm not stretching when I say that. Georgia, Auburn, Mississippi State, you know, just built theirs, I think it was 2-3 years ago, but they would love to have a new type of building like Purdue has, and that's something that Purdue can really pride themselves on, not only in recruiting, but like in a weekend like this when they bring people back for homecoming, it can be a really big show pony that they can kind of show off if they want to. And then once they get that south end zone figured out, that's another show pony that you can do. Again, not only it helps recruiting, but it helps when you're trying to just promote the university, and if you have to make some hires, you know, Mike talked about it in the previous segment, that it helps get you an athletic director like Mike Babinski, and it helps you get a football coach like Jeff Brown.
Yeah, Purdue had a really nice press box, has a really nice press box, had the nicest press box for about a year.
Yeah.
And then everybody else started doing the exact same press box. So for as much as we've talked about the training facility, that's awesome for Purdue right now, but the field is going to catch up. You're going to see these things start popping up like subways around college football. Purdue is never going to be ahead of everybody. When they get ahead of everybody, they're not going to stay there very long. So the counterpunch to that is to keep making sure you're moving forward. You're doing things other people aren't doing, and you're having a vision and you're trying to carry it out. And right now, over the last 18 months to 36 months, whatever the time frame's been, Purdue is doing that really well in every phase of its football program, both on the university side and on the actual football program side.
Yeah, you know, you look at, and the thing that's interesting, you know, we're all, and Brian can remember when, you know, it's been 15 years since the press box or the Shively has been finished, and I mean that is a half of a cycle of facilities. So I mean it is time to, and then some, and then the infrastructure thing I think he talked about, which will be interesting what they have to do if they have to deal with that upper bowl, and how do you deal with that in a year's time and not mess up your seating, will be an interesting story to watch as things unfurl and unfold from that standpoint. Well, let's look now, guys, at tomorrow. Boston College comes to town. Certainly a big challenge for Purdue. I'll start with you, Matt. You know, this is a team that likes to run the football in Boston College, but also threw it pretty successfully last week with 5 touchdown passes against Wake.
Yeah, their play-action pass is predicated on A.J. Dillon being able to run for 150-plus yards. Yeah. And so it really is a nice marriage that, you know, their offensive coordinator has really done a good job of marrying what Steve Adazio wants to do, which is pound the rock for as many times as you can do it. And then, you know, you mix in an Anthony Brown, who's a developing sophomore quarterback. They have really, really good tight ends. And I wrote about it this week, you know, on Gold and Black, that they really do. Purdue is using Wisconsin and Northwestern as examples as to show guys, okay, this is what they do. This is what you've seen before. This is not foreign to you. This is a Big Ten game that's going to be wrapped up in an ACC opponent. And this should be a matchup that you guys are familiar with. And for lack of a better term, you know, Purdue's middle of the defense, their defensive tackles, their linebackers, and their safeties, they feel really good about it from a defensive perspective, and they're trying to feed everything into that middle of the defense on Saturday.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is a matchup that, in its traditionalness, is much more favorable in the past couple. Purdue's issues defensively haven't been up the gut. They've been on the boundary. They've been rushing the passer, and they've been the cornerbacks being exposed when there's no pass rush. And I think Purdue can emphasize the run. They can put an extra guy in the box. They can run blitz periodically, mix things up a little bit. I think as Purdue's defense is constructed currently in this stage of its building process, And I think Saturday was the first game where the building process got Purdue because their defense is just not in a place right now where they can beat Missouri, an offense like Missouri's. I think that you'd much rather face a team that predicates itself on the running game, the power running game, than you would the downfield passing game. I just think Purdue has a chance to show this to be a much more favorable matchup, even though on paper the potency of Boston College's running game does not look like a very good matchup.
Yeah, I would say
a more traditional defense is better suited for Purdue.
I would definitely say that this
Offense,
is a better matchup. I've loved this matchup for Purdue since the beginning of the season. And the reasoning is that nobody would ever describe Boston College's offense as creative. Nobody has ever described Scott Loeffler as an offensive coordinator as creative. He was let go at Auburn. He was let go at Virginia Tech because they had a basic, fundamental offense that those fans didn't want to see anymore. And Steve Adazio hired him because he wants a basic, fundamental, pro-style offense of hand it 3 yards in a cloud of dust is not exactly what they do, but it's pretty darn close. And when you have a back like A.J. Dillon, it's hard to get around that. And they don't again, those 5 touchdown passes come because everybody's loading the box with 9, 10 guys because they want to stop A.J. Dillon. And so I think that's something that Purdue, Nick Holt has said, first and foremost, we got to contain and try to stop A.J. Dillon. Secondly, secondarily, we'll try to put some guys in coverage, but they're not worried about getting beat deep like they were the last 2 weeks of the season, and I think that sets up for Purdue very, very well.
Yeah, Brian.
Purdue was really good against the run last season.
Yeah.
They were not really good against the run last season because their front seven to a man was so much more talented than what they were facing on the other side of the ball. It was emphasis. It was Purdue built its defense around taking away the run and making people throw to beat them. It worked sometimes. It worked more often than not. And tomorrow, that's the model they go back to. And I just think, again, they are much better suited to do that. Missouri didn't run around Purdue, over Purdue, and through Purdue last weekend because of all those reasons. It's not because they were so much more physically dominant than Purdue's defense.
Yeah.
It's not because Purdue's defense was young. It's because the threat of Missouri's passing game put Purdue on skates. They had no answer for both things at once. I don't think Boston College presents that same sort of completeness. If they do, it's unbeknownst to me at this point. They may very well, but Purdue's mission tomorrow is to make Boston College throw the ball up the field and beat them. And Purdue is going to try to take away the run the best they can, and Purdue's track record of doing that based on all of last season is pretty good. Now, obviously, Boston College might be better than a lot of the teams Purdue did it against last year, but once again, in situations like this one, Purdue's track record is pretty good.
Run game tomorrow for Purdue, they didn't do much of it last week. When you throw for 572 yards, you can debate how much you really want to run the football, but how big of a deal, guys, I'll start with you, Matt, and is it important that Purdue can put up at least 120 rushing yards of its own tomorrow, or is that not really matter if they can throw it like they'd like to?
I think on first and maybe even second down, it's important for Purdue to show the threat that they can run the ball. Jeff Brom still believes in the run game. He just showed up last Saturday night knowing I'm not going to be able to do it if we're going to win this game. And we're going to be in a shootout. I've got to try to win a shootout. He showed up at the park with that attitude, and that's why you didn't see so much of the running game. It had nothing to do with a lack of confidence in the run game. It had nothing to do with his lack of confidence and lack of his perceived lack of ability of DJ Knox and Markel Jones. They can do it. It's just a matter of the matchup didn't work out well at all for Purdue to do it that way. I think the matchup presents a much better option for Purdue to do that, especially when I have concerns about Boston College's depth up front defensively. They had 7 starters play over 100 snaps last week at Wake. They had their defensive tackle, who's 285 pounds, was 91 snaps. They don't have much in terms of depth in their backups. So if Purdue is going to physically be able to dominate or at least be competitive in this ball game, I think that they have to be able to keep the football, and that offensive line has to basically be a power element toward the Boston College defense and make them play a lot of snaps and get them fatigued in the fourth quarter, because if it's a fourth quarter game, Jeff Brom does feel like eventually Purdue's going to break through and win one of these.
Yeah.
I don't know if you necessarily need to run the ball per se, but I think it'd be really helpful if you can control the ball a little bit.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want to have happen is you don't want 3 and outs
No.
You don't want quick turnovers. If you score quick, that's a good problem to have.
Right.
But you would like to keep your defense on the sideline a little bit, because this is that sort of running game where you would think that the fourth quarter is a hell of a lot different than the first quarter. And you don't want this to become a game where suddenly you're completely gassed on defense. You do not have great depth on defense. Purdue doesn't, especially up front.
Right.
You don't want to have to get down to your, second team defensive line playing really, really important snaps when the game is on the line at the end, because Lorenzo Neal is gassed, which 330-pounders tend to be when they play hard on every snap prior. I just think Purdue would be really well served to be really good on third down, like they were at times against Missouri. They would be really well served to, if not run the ball effectively, have a pretty effective ball control passing game. And I think you saw some signs of that against Missouri too. In addition to all the big plays, you saw Rondell Moore make a lot of big plays on third down,
11 catches,
which I think was one of the stories of that game that kind of got buried. It's just how reliable a player he's become on top of what a dynamic player he's become. But that's kind of an entirely different issue. I just think it's really important Purdue just not have 3, 4, 5 snap offensive possessions. They've got to move the chains a little bit and just keep their defense on the sideline.
Well, Rondell Moore, 7 first downs and 11 catches, I think it was,
Yeah.
last week. A very impressive number. 107 snaps Wake Forest had last week. So, to Brian's point, that may be something that, you'd like to, Purdue likes to snap, have, I don't know, they have 92 last week or whatever it was, but a big number. But there's a difference between 92 and 107 from that standpoint. All right, special teams is an interesting storyline for Boston College, just because they had some big problems have had it in the punt game, in terms of having 2 blocked last week, 1 return for a touchdown. This is Purdue got a field goal block. Purdue needs a spark from a special teams standpoint. They got it last week. It really turned that game around in a lot of ways, put Purdue back in it. Talk about that and what the Boilermakers need to do there, stating the obvious, maybe make a play in special teams.
I think if you did the old school Jimmy the Greek checkmark list, Purdue has a big checkmark in special teams, because Boston College has had 3 punts blocked the last 2 weeks. When they do get the punt off, it's been the worst punting average in the ACC, and their hang time hasn't been very good. Guess what? Purdue just replaced Jackson Anthrop with Rondell Moore as a punt returner. He could get a big return, even if they get the punt off. But I agree with you. The big play that I thought turned the game on the axis last Saturday was the field goal block by Jacob Thieneman. At that point, it's 27-10. You're starting to figure out if Missouri is going to really boat race Purdue in this, and then that happened, and it just felt like the whole place just got energized, and you knew that Purdue was going to still be able to score. So, yeah, I think Purdue has a lot of confidence in Spencer Evans as a field goal kicker, and I do think that Joe Shopper has been a reliable punter, and we always have the added element of surprise with Joe Shopper and the punt game at Purdue if they have to punt it on 4th down. So I do think that Purdue has a major element of advantage at special teams in every way, shape, and form. And then you look at Boston College hasn't had to kick a field goal through 3 games, and they have problems. They have a problem at kicker right now, because their starting kicker, who's a senior, may not make the trip to West Lafayette, and they're trying to work out this freshman, and they've missed 3 PATs, and you're just giving points away at that point. So definitely something that Purdue can get a major momentum play, either in the return game or with a block.
Yeah. Prediction. Oh, go ahead.
No, this should not be a big play Boston College offense.
Yeah.
If it is, then Purdue's got some real problems.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. I think special teams matter most in terms of field position.
Yeah.
Because when you have an offense that's happy to take 5 yards at a time, you can do the math of having to go 70 yards as opposed to having to go 40 or 50. It's just the more snaps you make somebody use to score, typically the better the chance you have to make plays that change things.
Which is really underscored going back 2 weeks to the Eastern Michigan game. That was a huge factor, is the fact that Purdue started every one of its drives until I think maybe the 4th quarter at the 25-yard line or in. And that, again, to your point there again, Brian, you can't do that as well in a rain-soaked situation and score the number of points you want to as well. All right, we'll have predictions on the site here a little bit, but if you're going to watch for one thing that Purdue has to do tomorrow, what is that to get the win?
I think it's control I think it's get off the field on third down,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, because I think if Purdue is in a situation where they're not getting off the field on third down and they're in a 3rd and 3 or less situation, that's exactly where Boston College wants to live. And I think that means that they're running the ball and pretty much physically controlling the game at the line of scrimmage the way they want to. If they're in more 3rd and 6 or greater situations, I think that's where Purdue can eat. They can maybe get some turnovers, and they can win the field position battle that way. So I think getting off the field on third down for Nick Holt's defense is going to be so key.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously just 1st and 2nd down on defense. Is you
Right.
want them in 3rd and 7, not 3rd
Yeah.
and 2. And if they can do that and make Boston College beat them in the passing game, and Boston College does, well then, at the end of the day, you're just, well,
Kudos to
we
you.
did exactly what we needed to do, and they just beat it. Good
Yeah.
beat good.
Yeah.
So I think you're okay with it. You just don't want to give up 200 yards rushing tomorrow and just have this slow bleed of a loss. If you lose because of Boston College's sophomore quarterback or young quarterback, whatever year he is,
Sophomore, yeah.
then great. That's the single most important thing to me. They all go hand in hand, but Matt says third down. I just say 1st and 2nd because they're all kind of interlocked.
All right, we will take a short break. We're going to bring Brian back on and talk a little recruiting, as he has a busy night tonight, has had a busy week, and then some. But we'll hit that topic and more, and for our 3rd and final segment of Gold and Black Live. Stay tuned.